Hello everyone, my name is Donnie, also known as Elevated, and welcome to Artifact Alchemy. You may recognize me from my educational Dota content over on the Dota Alchemy YouTube channel or website, but on this channel we are going to focus exclusively on Valve's new game, Artifact. I personally have been playing Magic the Gathering since I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I've been playing Dota since the very first map ever came out in Warcraft 3, so Dota 1, Heroes of Newerth, and now Dota 2. And so I'm very, very excited to start making some educational content surrounding this brand new, very fun, very deep strategy game. Because of my background in Dota, and because many of you are probably approaching Artifact from a background in Dota or some other MOBA, I'm going to try and draw some parallels between the games while I'm explaining some concepts for new players in Artifact. So without further ado, let me welcome you to the Dota Player's Guide to Artifact. And in this first video, we are going to cover the 5 major mistakes that new players are most likely going to be making when they hop into their first few games of Artifact. Mistake number 1, forgetting about improvements. In most card games, you have to keep track of your hand, the board, and sometimes the graveyard or wherever your cards go once you have cast them. However, in Artifact, you also need to keep track of these little circular improvements that will be placed on the board when you play them in any of the 3 lanes. Improvements are a vital part of the Artifact strategy, and they're something that are pretty easy to overlook for new players because of how much stuff is going on the board and the fact that you have to keep track of all 3 lanes, and many improvements can even be played from one lane into another one. I can't tell you how many times in my first 10 or 20 games of Artifact I've forgotten a critical move using an improvement that I placed there to help me win the game and ended up losing a game because I just completely forgot that it was there on the board. So whether you have to write yourself a sticky note or just make a habit of checking your hand, checking the board, and then checking the improvement rack is what I'm going to call it. It's the little part of the board right next to your tower where all of your improvements will go. Whatever ones you can cast in this current turn will be glowing, and make sure that you at least click on them. You don't have to cast them if you don't want to, but make sure you're at least checking them so you don't completely forget that they exist. Number 2, ruining your initiative by casting spells or creeps because you feel like you need to be doing something in every lane all the time. Like Dota, Artifact rewards patience and pre-planning. It's a strategy game. You need to look a number of moves ahead to actually figure out what the best play is every single round. And I know that from my own experience as a card game player and my own experience playing Artifact so far, is that this new initiative system, which basically allows whoever has initiative will end up playing first in each lane, and initiative will switch every time somebody does an action. So if I have initiative and I cast a spell, initiative now goes to my opponent. My opponent then casts a spell, then the initiative comes back to me. And so a lot of times when you're playing a game, it's very easy to feel like you have to be casting something every single hand, especially an artifact, in every single board. And this means that you are often ruining your initiative for something that might be more important down the line or in the next turn. Just because you have a 2-mana creep and you can cast it doesn't mean that you necessarily should. For example, if you have just a creep that you want to play to maybe do 2 or 3 extra damage to the enemy tower in this round, but you also have a hero that is going to die if you don't heal it, because the other team has some direct damage that will kill your hero if it is not healed, then playing that creep is going to end up killing your hero 1 or 2 boards over, or perhaps in the next turn if this is taking place in the 3rd lane. So initiative is one of the most important things to understand in the game of Artifact. It's something that will take a while to get the hang of. But basically, like Dota, if you are waiting to play, you'll often be setting your opponent up to reveal something about their strategy, and then you are able to respond to it. And in Dota, we would call this counter initiation. If you can respond to your opponent's play, oftentimes you're going to be able to make a better decision because you simply have more information. And that's really what initiative is all about. So pay attention to when you're casting things, and more importantly, why you're casting things and how it affects the rest of your game plan. Number 3, building decks with bad mana curves. Much like Dota and other card games, it's very, very important to address and have a plan for the various stages of the game of Artifact. There's an early game, there's a mid game, and there's a late game. And many new players get seduced by these big, high mana, flashy, extremely powerful cards that tend to end up in the late game, and neglect seemingly more insignificant, smaller cards. I mean, after all, wouldn't you rather play a 24/24 9 mana Thunderhide Alpha over a 2/2 Wool Martyr? I certainly would. It seems like it would have way more impact in the game. But what if you can never get to that 9 mana turn because you're constantly losing because you can't cast anything? That's definitely something that a lot of new players will probably make the mistake of, especially if you haven't played another form of trading card game or competitive card game. This is a very similar concept to having strong laning heroes or supports in Dota 2. They basically enable your strong late game heroes to get to the late game and have the amount of space and resources to be powerful by effectively winning the early stages of the game, or at least stalling the game out until the late game. And this is a really, really important concept to understand because, generally speaking, you want to be able to play, or at least respond to your opponent's plays in each stage and at each mana. So 3, 4, 5, 6, and blue in particular, the blue color in Artifact is really, really built around this, where most of their early curve or low cost mana cards are entirely dedicated to stalling the game, controlling the game, getting to those 6 and 7 and 8 mana cards, which are then going to allow you to win the game. Number 4, counterplaying or counter-initiating. And this is kind of tied to number 2 with initiative, but counter-initiating or counterplaying in Artifact is just as powerful as it is in Dota 2. Playing with more information by wasting a few play cycles to equip items or play low-cost cards or heal a unit can get your opponent to reveal their ultimate plan and then allow you to negate a lot of damage by counterplaying that. So when we talked about the initiative system, basically each player goes back and forth playing cards until they decide to pass. So if you have 7 mana, you could play a 1 mana card first, and then your opponent's going to have to respond. And if their ultimate plan is just that next card, maybe it's like a 7 mana card, then you know exactly what they can do for the rest of the turn. And you have 6 more mana and perhaps other cards in your hand to respond to that. If you just immediately play your big bomb card or your trump card or whatever card you're kind of trying to win with immediately every single turn, it's going to be very easy for your opponents to read what you're trying to do. They're going to be able to counter you and respond to those plays. So a lot of the times you'll see players just kind of equipping, a fairly useless item to a hero, or maybe twiddling some heroes by controlling them, using a 1 mana card to make one hero attack another unit that doesn't really seem that important. But really what's going on is that they're just trying to waste a little bit of time to make you reveal what you actually want to do. And then once you've done that, respond. So counterplaying, counter-initiating, like in Dota, it's very, very strong because it gives you more information to work with and allows you to make better decisions. Number 5, blindly following the meta and stifling creativity. This is a big one for me. This is something that I've always been talking about in my Dota videos, is that this is a strategy game, and while there are going to be stronger strategies and weaker strategies, it's really important to just be creative. Sure, there's going to be some decks that are just better than others because they're built better. Maybe they're built by somebody who has more experience. Maybe they just have better cards. But I think in a game like Artifact and a game like Dota, for example, there's always other things that you can tweak to make work. There's a finite number of cards, but there's so many different combinations with which these can be put together to create a deck. And so I think that while there are very, very strong, seemingly hard to beat combos, like having an Axe and a Legion Commander and a Drow Ranger, for example, in the same deck, there probably are ways to counter it that people haven't come up with yet. And so if you just look at your favorite pro or streamer and they have this very strong deck and they're winning all of these games, don't just immediately build that same deck and only play that. Experiment a little bit, try something out, play a mono blue deck, play a mono black deck where you're only playing one color and you're coming up with some weird strategy that steals mana or maybe focuses around on just doing direct damage to their tower. And don't just give in to playing the meta, quote unquote. This is something that we see a lot in Dota 2, where whatever heroes are popular in the professional scene tend to be very popular in the pub matchmaking scene. And a lot of the time this leads to toxicity and just bad play because the strategies that the professional players are employing with these heroes are often much more difficult to pull off in an uncoordinated public environment. Just the same way, in Artifact, there might be some really cool combo deck that a professional Artifact player is playing or a streamer is playing. Maybe you don't have quite all the same cards as they do, and therefore you're not building it or playing it in the exact same way. And when that kind of thing is happening, it ends up just making the game less fun, and it feels stale for everybody. If everybody's just playing the same deck, it's going to make the game boring very, very quickly. There's a lot of creativity and a lot of room for creativity in a game like this, and especially as new cards get introduced, there's going to be people that say, okay, these are the 10 most important cards. But then if you wait a couple of months, maybe somebody else will say, wait, these are the 10 most important cards. And maybe you yourself will suddenly realize, wait, this card that everybody says is bad is actually pretty good when it's put with this and this and this. So be creative. Don't be afraid to experiment. It's not all about just winning every single game of Artifact. I think you're going to have a lot more fun, and who knows, you might come up with the most ridiculous, most broken combo of cards that anyone's ever seen. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope these 5 mistakes that I personally have made will help you not make them quite so much as you're learning the new game of Artifact. And let me know if you enjoyed this video in the comment section below. Let me know what content you would like to see me focusing on here on the Artifact Alchemy YouTube channel. Good luck, have fun, and we will see you next time.